You're listening to the Weekend Sport Podcast with Jason Pine from News Talk ZB.
Well, Jack White wrote a very interesting opinion piece. You might be able to check it out on Rugby Pass this afternoon if you get a moment or two. Eligibility-wise, always a thorny topic when it comes to New Zealand rugby and the All Blacks. Picking players from overseas or not, it's again reared its heads with All Blacks coach Scott Robertson asked about it after the final game of the Test season last week by media. He's spoken about it before, of course, and has used the phrase he used last week, open mind, or keeping an open mind, before. But this time, he's going to present to the New Zealand Rugby Board armed with a bit more information, some data. He's had 14 tests in charge, of course, this year. He's coached at test level for the first time. He's got more evidence as to where the game is heading and being able to pick players from overseas. Certainly seems that his perspective is some ability to pick players from offshore. This, of course, with Richie Mo'unga currently playing his rugby at Toshiba in Japan. Suggestions and reports abound that he is poised to sign with New Zealand Rugby. Again, nothing official on that front at this point in time. As I say, former Springboks coach Jack White, a World Cup winning one at that, writing column for Rugby Pass in the last day or so. And this line from it: Scott Robertson's men would have been frustrated to have gone down to France by a point and failed to put away Italy after they put 96 points on them just over a year ago. I can understand them looking around and saying maybe we just bring in the overseas guys, but I don't think that's the silver bullet to solve their desperation to retain the crown as the world's best team. It's a column worth reading, but to explain more, Jake White, former Springboks coach, now the Bulls director of rugby, joins us on News Talk ZB this afternoon. Jake, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. No, pleasure. I'm glad I can join you guys.
Jake, I really enjoyed reading that piece that you wrote for Rugby Pass. It was thought-provoking. I've tried to summarise it for our listeners, but in your own words, perhaps explain to us why you believe that it would be the wrong step for New Zealand Rugby to open the eligibility doors to players from abroad.
I'm old school, and it's a debate. It's a debate about there will be people that go, which they have been. I've been following the bloggers. And there's a lot of sentiment about, come on, it's modern times. It's players can earn money. Surely they can play overseas and play for their country. I just think, it's not by chance that the 4 out of the 5 or 5 out of the top 6 teams don't pick foreign-based players. England don't, France don't, New Zealand don't, and Ireland don't, and they consistently stay on the top of world rugby. I asked myself the question, and I asked a couple of guys because I knew you were going to phone me tonight. And Elliot, it's very simple. If we had lost the quarterfinal by 1 point, and I know we won the quarterfinal by 1, the semi-final by 1, the final by 1, if we had lost the quarterfinal by 1 point, would the world be following our model and saying that picking foreign-based players is the way to go forward? And I'm not so sure that would be the model everyone would want.
It's focused around, I guess, Richie Mo'unga from a New Zealand perspective and getting him back from overseas. But if the doors were open and he was still playing in Japan, you could pick him from there, and it would allow Sam Cane, for example, to be picked. But do you think it's a dangerous precedent to pick it on the basis of, say, one player or one players at a certain point in history?
Well, you could have won the World Cup with Nick Evans, and you went for Stephen Donald. So I saw again, someone said to me the 4th or 5th, and when you had Nick Evans playing at Harlequins, who was on top of his game, playing in the UK, didn't get picked for the World Cup, picked Stephen Donald, who was whitebait fishing, ended up winning the World Cup. So, it's ironic. I think that if you look, New Zealand have never had to pick foreign-based players and have still won 3 World Cups. So, I don't think that, well, this is my humble opinion, I don't think that Richie Mo'unga is going to make you win the World Cup. I think you've got enough rugby players there. And if it means that you've got to pick Richie Mo'unga and Tazelle as the loose forward to end up winning the World Cup, well then I think the problem's much deeper than you guys foresee.
At the top of your column, you mentioned some of the sacrifices, Red Conway and the finger being amputated, Buck Shelford, of course, and the stray boot, and Sam Whitelock's grandfather, you mentioned as well, Nelson Dalzell, who was injured in the Second World War, went on to play for the All Blacks. And that sacrifice, you go overseas, you sacrifice something, and that is, in this case, an All Blacks jersey.
Well, there's a very, very easy thing to say. You've got to sacrifice, and sacrifice has got to hurt. I mean, it's easy to say, I know we're living in modern times, but I think, I can't overemphasize enough that I think having toured New Zealand many times, having watched from outside how important the black jersey is, having read many, books about how important the black jersey is, having seen many documentaries about how important the black jersey is, I think you open that gate and you allow foreign players that are playing abroad to pick for your country, I think you're going to lose something that's very, very unique in your country. And that is the thing I think that keeps the All Blacks from outside. That's the thing that I see that keeps the All Blacks as competitive as any country in any sport year after year. And I think once you change that, I'm not convinced you're ever going to get it back.
We probably look at South Africa at the moment and go, well, you can pick all these players from overseas and then the ones that are developing, and you are sides like the one that you're director of rugby for, and gives them a wider pool. But do you think that's not necessary? It's just a happenstance of, because we're at this point in time, South Africa's got the depth, it'll swing back at some other points in New Zealand, other countries around the world, that this is just a moment in time with the depth scenario for the All Blacks?
That's exactly what I think. I think it all goes in cycles. People said, if it wasn't for players playing overseas, we wouldn't have produced the Kane and Moody's, and we wouldn't have produced the youngsters that are coming through. The answer to that is very simply, where did all the young players come through in the old days? Where did the Ergius Neymans, the Paul Willemses, the Louis de Jakers and all that come through when we had a generation of players who never left the shores? So I think it's one-eyed to suggest that because people are playing overseas, therefore we produce better players in South Africa. I really don't believe that that's the case. I mean, we produce some very, very good rugby players. In fact, some of the best players in the world in the times that no one was allowed to play overseas or no one was picked from playing overseas. So I genuinely don't think it's one or the other.
2007 Rugby World Cup winning coach Jake White, who won it with the Springboks, with us on Weekend Sport. He's currently the Blue Bulls Director of Rugby. Jake, obviously there's been a lot of success for the Springboks since they changed those eligibility laws, and there's circumstances dictating it around the rand and the power of that abroad. But do you think that anyone will go, actually, we need to wind this back and get our players back playing in South Africa domestically?
No, well, I'll answer your question. If there's anyone in South Africa that wants it like that, it's me. I mean, I coach a provincial side in South Africa, and we must never kill the goose that lays the golden egg. If it's going to be a free-for-all where everyone can go overseas and still play international rugby, then what will happen is that the domestic rugby in our country will die. And, the supporters won't put money into the game, the sponsors won't put money into the game, the supporters won't come to the games and watch live rugby because the best players will be playing in other competitions. So, we've got to be careful what we wish for, because if all the best players in New Zealand are never in New Zealand and they only play for the All Blacks, well, then you're going to kill your domestic game. And the one thing New Zealand have managed to do with a very small population is build up their grassroots, their club rugby, their schools rugby, their university rugby, even their women's rugby at this stage. So, there's no doubt in my mind that once you open the gate, and I say it again, you're going to lose something that's very, very special to New Zealand.
Just finally on that point, Jake, the line your rugby pass thing is that short-term gain for long-term pain, because once you open that gate, you can't really close it, can you, from a New Zealand perspective?
Well, I mean, you go back and rewind the clock. Once you put a sponsor on your jersey, that was gone. You guys hung on for years and years without having to put a sponsor on the front of your jumper, and you still won World Cups. So it does work. It does work. I think, I just said to someone tonight, I knew you were going to call me and I was going to ask you a question. If I had said to you 10 years ago that a boy van der Merwe would be playing for Scotland, you would have thought I was crazy. If I told you 10 years ago that Israel Folau could play for Australia and for Tonga, you would have said I'm crazy. And that's what's happened, is slowly but surely we're just eroding the thing that was so unique about our game, and that was to play for your country, sing the national anthem. And I Elliot, I came up with an idea, and I know it's completely left field, but so is where we are now in terms of what old school people thought. But what's to stop us from, in 10 years' time, saying that everybody who plays in the Premiership in England can play for England, and everyone who plays in the Japanese league can play for Japan, and everyone that plays in the French league can play for France. So if you're Kiwi, Fijian, Georgian, and you play in that league, you can play for that country. I mean, if I said that now, people would go, "You lost your marbles, Jack. You got no idea where we're going." But I mean, what's changed? I was at Montpellier when Duan van der Merwe asked me, "Please, I need to get out of my contract. I need to get to Edinburgh. They've earmarked me as a guy who can play for Scotland. I need to be there by the end of the year, otherwise I lose the 3-year window. If I go in January, I've got to wait 5 years." So I was part of that whole transfer when he was earmarked by the Scottish Rugby Union to come across. Now, I mean, that's why I wrote in that article about, the foreign players as well. I mean, I've never probably, because I've lived in a country where you have so many players, a bit like New Zealand. Maybe I would think differently if I was in a small nation where I could go and headhunt the best 40, 50 juniors every year, put them in academy and then bring them through for my country. But is that the way it's going to go? Is that where the minor unions are going to go and start academies where they go and get and recruit the best juniors, and then basically everything in your country is meaningless? Because I mean, what you could have, let's just use an example like Wales. If they went and got the 15 best Kiwi players at school level and the 20 best South African players, and 35 players every year went to go and live in Wales, and in 5 years' time, those players are then all eligible for Wales. Mm. I mean, I'm not sure that's what Welsh rugby in the valleys and where they come from would really want as well. So that's why I said it's a debate. It's not a view that I think everyone's got an opinion. I just think that New Zealand need to hang on to the thing they've held so dearly for so long. Otherwise, I think that whatever they've done in the past then becomes meaningless.
Jack White with us on News Talk ZB. Jack, before I let you go, it's an interesting point, and 10 years' time, maybe down the track, it will be that case. Before I let you go, I want to get your thoughts. You started at the start of a World Cup cycle in 2004. Scott Robertson's done the same. What's your view on his first season in charge as All Blacks head coach?
Well, I think he'd admit himself that coaching Test rugby is very different to coaching a provincial side like the Crusaders. I'm sure he's learnt a lot. And New Zealand rugby will be back. I think the one thing again and this is why I can't applaud you enough or praise you enough. I mean, I've been privy to sitting in a change room with Jock Hobbs and Alex Wiley and Sir Brian Lahore and the legends of the game sitting next to us in the change room having a debate about the Test match. And I think the one thing I think New Zealand have got the edge on every other country is they want to get it right. They want to uphold all the things that are important, and they want to share whatever they have to share to make sure that their country stays on top of the world. So, I have no doubt, whatever mistakes they've made, whatever lessons they need to learn, I'm sure they will learn them. I'm sure that everyone involved in New Zealand rugby will contribute to them getting better, and I have no doubt that in the next couple of years, New Zealand rugby will get stronger and stronger. And it won't be because when 2 or 3 players back from overseas, or play them while they're overseas for the All Blacks. I still think that their rugby culture, their whole aura, everything they stand for in New Zealand rugby is much stronger than any individual. And let's be fair, that has been the narrative that's come out of New Zealand from day one, is that no player is ever stronger or ever more important than the jersey. And long may that last.
Jack White, it's been a pleasure catching up with you. Thank you very much for your thoughts, and wish you the best of luck tomorrow morning against Connacht, New Zealand time.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Elliot. All the best.
That is Jack White joining us on News Talk ZB this afternoon. You caught up with him in Galway, of all places. The Blue Bulls playing Connacht in the URC tomorrow morning. Lucky enough to get some of Jack White's time. It'd be great to get an outsider's perspective on that eligibility. When I saw that piece, because there's been a lot of column inches written this year in New Zealand and externally saying the All Blacks need to change their selection policy and they need to pick players from Japan or wherever else players might be playing. It was interesting to get a World Cup winning coach's perspective from someone outside the country. He's, as you heard there, very much against the prospect of selecting players from abroad for the All Blacks. A specific set of circumstances has led to South Africa doing it around their economy. But he says, he listed at the top, didn't he? France, Ireland, England, All Blacks don't select players from abroad.
For more from Weekend Sport with Jason Pine, listen live to News Talk ZB weekends from midday or follow the podcast on iHeartRadio.